Is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Happy Thursday to you guys. A little bit less smoky out in the world, I think, today, or at least in the New York area, a little bit less smoky. I think we went down from a dangerous, don't go outside, try not to breathe too much today, air conditions, to down to just something like, yeah, it's pretty bad out there and it's dangerous, but it's a little, at least you can like see as you walk down the street. So that's kind of fun. Just taking a second here to put my lineups in real quick so I have a placeholder so that I can actually play this slate after we're done talking about it. Weird little slate today. We've got a 5-gamer that starts at 6:05 on the FanDuel slate, so make sure that you're getting your stuff done ahead of time here for FanDuel. And then we've got a 4-gamer on the DK slate that was originally a 5-gamer, but that Yankees-White Sox game became the second game of a doubleheader, so now you won't get any points from anybody that you roster from that game, according to the note that I read on DraftKings. So you got 4 games to deal with, short slate on the DK slate, a little bit more meat on the bone on FanDuel. We get a good pitcher from that first game on FanDuel. We get a good hitting opportunity. So I think we get a little bit more depth, a little bit more of an interesting slate on FanDuel, and you're really crunched for quality on the DK slate. So it's going to be interesting to take a look at. We've got a few pitchers going, a few high-end pitchers going, and then kind of a mixed bag. So we've got a few interesting spots to talk about. Somebody was asking in our Discord, Nariki was asking about the opportunity against Jose Barrios, who has gone completely bust in spots before, especially for power upside. He was asking specifically about the home run upside against him, and I think that's an interesting spot today. It was leading the power index, leading the home run model over on the site. So if you go over to Roto Scouts, you can check that out, see where all the power's laying today, see where maybe we uncover some low owns potential upside plays that are going to be going up against a decent, not great, but decent pitcher. I don't think the Astros necessarily qualify as that today. Looks like they'll be getting some popularity around like the Jordans and whatnot of the world. But the version of the lineup that they rolled out could have some sneaky plays in it. So we'll get through all that. I got my placeholders in, so we'll dive into the slate here as people trickle into the old chat here. I see Larry's out there. We got Stephen B out there. So a couple good guys out in the crowd already. Let's see what else we got. 12 people out in the crowd here. Hit the like button and the subscribe, guys. Let us know, or show me some love. And if you hit the subscribe button, it lets you know when I go live. Yeah, that's the easy way to say that, right? So spread the word too, by the way. If you're talking about fantasy sports with your friends, obviously let them know that we exist and let them know that we're doing these shows, because growing the audience is part of the whole routine here. With that, let's dive in game by game. Talk about this weird little slate. We can kind of meander our way through. If you guys got questions or anything like that, drop them into the chat. But first game up on deck, this is the FanDuel only game. We've got Zach Wheeler on the hill going up against the Detroit Tigers. I can't think of a better spot for a guy like Zach Wheeler to put up a pretty strong score on the FanDuel slate here. Guy who pitches deep into ball games regularly, is good at limiting power, is facing the weakest team in baseball. The Tigers are, I think it was a 70 WRC plus against right-handed pitching this year, and then the next worst team is the Cleveland Guardians, and they're at an 82. So we know how bad the Guardians have been all season long. Their 82 is just an awful number overall for a collective WRC plus for a team. But the Tigers are 12 percentage points worse than that for run creation against righties. It has not been pretty in Detroit this year. So I think you get Wheeler in a fantastic spot. 10-8 puts him at a little bit better of a price than the Frombers and the Spencer Striders of the world. And he projects right alongside those guys for me. So I think FanDuel, you get a nice little bonus from having Zach Wheeler on the board here today. You fire away. If you wanted to say he would be your most exposed pitcher and you undercut the guys who are on both slates, I don't think that's necessarily a mistake given the matchup here. Frommer's going to be facing a tough matchup in the Blue Jays. Strider has the lower end Mets with no Pete Alonso in the lineup, so that's going to be a great spot for Spencer Strider. Despite price, I expect he's going to be more popular than Wheeler here just because, I mean, he's by far the best pitcher in baseball right now, especially when it comes to what we're looking for strikeouts and everything for DFS purposes. But on depth, on quality, on definite strikeout upside here for Wheeler, I really like this spot. It's not necessarily a spot, even with a short slate in mind, where I really want to grab many Tigers bats. On a short slate, I'll have a little bit of everything. So I will have, like, don't say if you see me with an explosive Tigers lineup that happened to score 12 runs on Zach Wheeler for some reason, don't say, hey, you told us not to play Zach Wheeler or play the Tigers against Wheeler. I will have a little bit, but I'm building 150 lineups. If I'm building one, and I'm looking for, I have to play a contrarian team in that spot, it's probably not going to be the Tigers here. They're just too low end for my taste. Zach Wheeler's too good at limiting power. 5.2% barrels. He keeps the ball down. He checks exit velocity. So a 1.70% home run rate, it's just, there's not enough there. And you're getting it from this low-end Tigers team. So Zach McKinstry, if you're going to Tigers, you want Zach McKinstry off the top. Lefty, kind of productive since he's been in that leadoff role. A nice little 126 WRC plus to lead the team if we leave Zach Short off that list from the 9 spot. Short's only made 59 plate appearances, so I'm not counting his 142 WRC plus in that. But over 181 plate appearances, McKinstry, 126 WRC plus. That's respectable enough production, right? So we can go there to start our lineup with him. But you're not supported by much. Javi Baez having a god-awful season, 3 home runs, a .087 ISO, a 59 WRC plus. It is not pretty for Javi Baez here. Spencer Torkelson, I've talked about it a little bit. I think there's maybe a little bit of life in the fact that he's shaved 2 percentage points off of his strikeout rate. The walk rate was over 10% last week when I was talking about it initially, but like a little bit of signs of life in the strikeout rate and the walk rate improvements, and those are good enough from the guy with the idea of power, but he's just not translated really anything into his stats. 227, 309, 356, a 130 ISO and 87 WRC plus, and only 5 homers over 246 plate appearances. What I'm hoping starts to translate for that kid, and what the Tigers have to be hoping for, is that the 9.8% barrels, the 50% hard hits starts coming through a little bit more for him. So, that's what you hang your hat on if you go to Torkelson. Nick Maton, lefty stick, 6 home runs on the year, but only slashing 162, 286, 318. With the idea that the team's probably going to have to sequence and not hit home runs against Wheeler here, that's not the right guy to have in the middle of a stack if you're going to Tigers here. So I would include him because he's going to be hitting cleanup. He's got a little bit of power from the left side, and he's cheap, but it's not a great option. Eric Haas hit a bunch of things. The way I put it in the article today was Eric Haas hit a bunch of home runs 2 years ago, but a bunch of things happened 2 years ago that I wouldn't necessarily want to pay for tonight. I don't know that I need any Haas here. It's not like he's going to be a guy who's going to help turn the lineup over, help sequence, or anything like that. You might get lucky with the Haas play, but it's not pretty. Akil Baddoo, I do think belongs in Tiger stacks. If you're building Tiger stacks, 3 home runs, 6 stolen bases. It's not like it's great amount of output, but that's good for this team. 98 WRC plus puts him among the team leaders for run creation. Jonathan Scope, Tyler Nevin, Zach Short, low end on the back ends. Scope 202, 276, 258 for the season. Another guy who used to be a good player, used to hit home runs, and just has completely just died out in Detroit toward the back end of his career. So it's not pretty. If you're going to Tigers, it's some of those lefties, and maybe you take your shots with Javi and Spencer Torkelson and move on. But only limited exposure there. On the other side of this one, you can definitely roster some Phillies here. Tyler Holton, lefty, bullpen arm, 31 innings entirely out of the bullpen, multi-inning bullpen arm. He's gone 2, he's gone 3 in a couple spots this year, but I don't expect more than 3 innings. I would cap him at 3 innings, and he is not a high-end guy anyway. 18.9% strikeouts, a 4.25 xFIP, a 2.32 ERA out of the pen. That's all fine, but if you're not racking up strikeouts out of the bullpen, you're probably not going to be doing it over 3-4 innings as a starter. I expect 3 innings. I expect a low strikeout total. It was most likely, last I saw, they hadn't announced a bulk reliever. I think it's going to be the kid who was supposed to start yesterday, Reese Olson, but I haven't seen that confirmed. Either way, I don't think you're using a pitcher in this game. I think you're just going to Phillies bat, or a pitcher from the Detroit side rather, in this game. I think you just go to Phillies bats. Joker's going nuts under the table here. Is my oh, okay. My stream was behind on YouTube. I just pulled the YouTube channel up and saw that it was just my face, and I guess it was just streaming behind. So wanted to make sure you guys could see the spreadsheet here. So, as I was saying, Joker just left the room, which is good. The Phillies, I think we're going to these bats all day long against this pitching option, whatever form it takes. Tigers bullpen, not an intimidating bullpen is the point. You get Kyle Schwarber, you get Nick Castellanos, Bryce Harper, Trey Turner off the top. That's a pretty star caliber foursome. I expect they'll be pretty popular on the FanDuel slate in this spot, but they're fairly cheap for their talents. All those guys in the 3,000s, Trey Turner only at 3,000. I know he's struggling. I don't care. It's Trey Turner. We're getting him in the cleanup role. He's kind of come to life a little bit. Hit a couple home runs in the last week and change. 7 home runs, 8 stolen bases on the year. Only a 79 WRC plus, which is why we're getting him for 3,000. I'll go to that play for the rest of the year. I don't care. I'll ride it all the way to the salary floor if I have to. Kyle Schwarber, obviously, you're not getting batting average out of Kyle Schwarber, but again, we just don't care. 16 home runs on the season, a 252 ISO, additional plate appearances if he's leading off here, or he is leading off, it's a confirmed lineup. 14.6% barrels, 48.9% hard hits. Both of those have dipped from last year's outstanding 20.1 and 54.4. 16 home runs, though. I mean, we know what Kyle Schwarber is here. I don't worry about the lefty-lefty to start the game. We're fine with that. Castellanos cooled badly in May, had a bad May after a great March and April, and then has kind of roared back to life in late May and early June here. So I think we're going to Castellanos. Bryce Harper's Bryce Harper. JT Realmuto is a valuable catcher from late in the lineup. You can play Realmuto at 2,800. You can play him like a first baseman on FanDuel, and they don't really have, like, you're saying maybe no to Cody Clemens if you do that, or you're doing like a weird configuration with JT Realmuto, Cody Clemens, and then you stick Bryce Harper in an outfield spot. You do have first base eligibility on Harper on the FanDuel slate here for only 3,600, which is a value in and of itself. But my point there was I think you can just play JT Realmuto as if he was like a mid-range first baseman. He's very, very cheap, 5 home runs, 8 stolen bases. He's better when you get him as a catcher value where you have to play catchers, but he's perfectly viable on the FanDuel slate here, and probably will be a little bit underowned for his talent, for his spot in that lineup, for his spot against this pitcher. I'm not saying he's going to be 2% owned, but for, who he is in this spot, I bet, 10, 12 if everybody else is, if like Harper and Schwarber are pushing the 20s, 10, 12, 14, somewhere around there. But you could say that's low owned for that spot in the lineup for this hitter. Bryson Stott, Brandon Marsh, Cody Clemens, definite upside there. I like Stott better in the leadoff role when he's correlating with Castellanos, Harper, and all those guys, but he's serviceable enough in the 6th spot. Could give you a sneaky little back end if you wanted to grab like a cheap 3-man stack. I don't think you're necessarily making a mistake with those 3 lefties. Again, I don't really care about any kind of lefty-lefty or anything like that. We're probably not going to see Holton for that long, and he's not a high-end lefty, so plenty of contact available for these 3 guys. Marsh, 49.5% hard hit rate, 8.1% barrels, was better starting the season, but overall 120 WRC plus over 202 plate appearances, and he's cheap at 2,700. Cody Clemens has power upside, 4 home runs and only 93 plate appearances this year, only at 38.3% hard hit, but an 8.3% barrel rate, decent enough barrel rate for a guy who only costs 2,400. The issue there is you don't get him at like an outfield spot. You got to stick him at first base, which, while maybe not impactful on a team sense, like what I was talking about with Realmuto, I think Cody Clemens sticking him at first base, maybe you take away a more valuable first base option from another spot. It's not a deep slate, so I think you're fine doing that today, but on deeper slates, there are positional plays like at those corner infield spots where sometimes I just want a better player. I want a higher upside guy, more plate appearances from higher in a lineup at a first base spot, where putting a guy like that in the outfield where you get 3 bites at the apple is a little bit different. So just, one of the ways that I think about positional value when I'm putting these lineups together, like cross slate positional value. So I think that's important to think about, particularly when you're hand building, which is something I try and touch on a little bit, like when people ask lineup building questions in the Discord, because I know that not everybody's out there putting 150 lineups together using optimizers, using sorting, and so on and so forth. And I actually think that's the fun of DFS, is actually sitting there hands-on and moving things around and seeing, all right, if I put this here, what does it do to the rest of my lineup? What else is available from the rest of the slate? And that's where a lot of the things I talk about when I say, if you use option X, say a cheaper pitcher who's maybe got a little bit of a ceiling, but a lower ceiling than a more expensive, more popular guy, I always try and talk about that in terms of this is a play for value here. It's an ownership play, et cetera, here. But what it does is it unlocks these potential hitting combinations. Now you can have Jordan Alvarez, Kyle Tucker, and let's say Vlad Guerrero, who cares? And this guy, instead of these 2 guys, one or the other, and that guy, or, these 2 guys, but not that 3rd guy. So it just unlocks otherwise unavailable combinations, which has value in and of itself outside of just being, hey, this pitcher's lower owned than that pitcher. So a lot of the times I think people who talk about this stuff end up talking about it in a more restricted sense, where they're just saying that individual part of the play without talking about like the more important downstream effect that those decisions have on lineup construction. So that's where I try and dig in a little bit as we talk about these things. But we don't want to waste too much time. It is a short slate. We have time to talk about those things, but it also starts at 6:05 and it's already 4:15. So let's move on. Welcome, DK gamers. We're on the 4 games that are on your slate now. Great opportunity for pitching in this one. I really like Framber Valdez in general, as you guys know. I think it's a good spot to roster him. 10-4, 11-1. He'll probably be cut a little bit in terms of popularity going up against this Blue Jays lineup. I think more people will go to Strider. On the FanDuel slate, I think more people will go to a cheaper Wheeler than Valdez here. But Valdez totally justified. It's a tough strikeout matchup against the Blue Jays. I give them that much credit for sure. You get Brandon Belt in there with a 37.3% strikeout rate, Chapman at 26%. Everybody else in this confirmed Blue Jays lineup in the teens when it comes to strikeout rate. So even with those two elevated totals, you can see 19.2% for the team. That's very good. And when you have three outstanding players at the top of the lineup like these guys, Bo Bichette, George Springer, and Vladdy Guerrero all striking out in the mid-teens, that's a dangerous thing to throw even a pitcher like Framber into. So his strikeout upside has been fantastic this year. He's pushed strikeouts up to 26.9%. That was up from 23.5% last year. Joker's back. 21.9%. He's a big Framber fan as well. Buddy, go lie down, would you? Come on. We'll do something fun later on. Go lie down. He's annoyed because we haven't really been able to take our long strolls the last couple of days with the smoke conditions and everything, so he's a little bit antsy today. Anyway, I was talking about Framber Valdez's strikeout rate, which is much more important for our purposes here. So 26.9% bump up on that. Just kind of throwing more called strikes, but not really that many more. Just I think it's more effective. Like this is a minor downturn from 11-3 last year in the swinging strikes to 11-1. That's inconsequential, that downturn, and a minor uptick from 28.8% CSW to 29.1. It's just been a little bit more effective for him this year, and just pitching dynamite overall. 2.16 ERA, 2.70 xFIP, has cut his walks from 8.1% last year to 5.1%. That's fantastic, and he's limiting launch angle 1.3 degrees. Last year, negative 3.6. The year before, negative 5.5, which was something I was just hyper-focused on with this guy at all times the past couple of seasons. It's come up a little bit, probably in exchange for those strikeouts and for cutting the walk rate, and I think that's a totally fine trade-off here. It's not like it's really impacted his home run rate, sitting at 1.92. Just excellent at keeping the ball down and checking opposing power. You can see that coming through in what happens to, and this happens every time a team goes up against Framber, and you can see it in other guys. We talk about it with like Logan Webb, other guys who check launch angle. It cuts these home run rates in half. Vladdy Guerrero is typically over a 10 or approaches a 10 at the very least. Same thing with like the Bo Bichettes, the Springers of the world here. So limited power potential. I think Framber's got a great shot to shut down the Blue Jays here. But I do think this is a spot where if the Blue Jays are a little lower owned than, let's say, in a vacuum, they typically would be if it was a matchup against any other pitcher, on a short slate, I do think there's potential upside in that. If they happen to chase Framber early enough in the game, let's say they get him out of there in the 6th, just by virtue of seeing a bunch of pitches, they're a frustrating team to pitch against. They're difficult to strike out. So maybe he hits like 100 pitch cap, something like that in 6 innings and comes out. He's a guy who typically does go very deep into games, 79 innings in 12 starts. But let's say they chase him a little bit early. Now you get a little bit of additional upside against what is a very good Houston bullpen. So, maybe you get the couple innings there, a couple plate appearances there for these guys where they're not facing Framber, and then you get the upside of just probably star caliber players at low ownership. Even Framber's not completely invulnerable, right? So maybe they string together a few hits, maybe they sequence against him, those low strikeout totals work out, maybe he walks a couple hitters and goes back to the 8 and change walks instead of the 5 and change walks that he's at. So you're hunting for low-owned upside plays. I think the Blue Jays are a source of them. It's a low expectation play, though. I don't see it working that many times. If we ran the slate 1,000 times, I don't think they get to Framber all that many times. But they'll get him. So I think we go there a little bit. Joker, go lie down, pal. Jeez. Larry C says today was a lot better out than the past 2 days. Not as hazy. Doesn't smell like a campfire yet. Larry, you're down the Jersey Shore? I don't know if I knew that. If you are, I had forgotten that. Or I assume you're not lying in the chat, so I assume that you are. Knowing that you are, I guess I had forgotten that or I didn't know that. But I'm in Jersey City. I think you knew that. We should have a Roto Scouts get-together one day. We'll have a little camp out. We'll have a little cookout. And hit the baseball around or something. It's fun. We're down the shore, Larry. I grew up in Monmouth County in the Red Bank, Middletown area, so I know the shore quite well. My sister's down in the Toms River area these days. Anyway, Let's move on. So we were talking about Barrios at the top of the show. Somebody had asked, Nurki had asked if this was a good spot to target for Barrios for some power, and I think it potentially is. The home run model kind of agrees here. We're seeing some power upside for sure, but Barrios has been the good version of Barrios this year for the most part. He hasn't given up a ton of power, right? Last year, he was sitting at a 3.85% home run rate on an elevated 43.4% hard hits, 9.5% barrels. This year, he's cut that back down to respectable enough levels in terms of the barrels, 7.9. The average exit velo only 87.1 miles an hour, and the hard hit rate outstanding, 31.7%. That's better than he was 2 years ago when he only led up to a 2.82% home run rate. The average exit velo that year was 88.4. So this was a bad spike that he had in this season, but he's never, he's always been like that second, third tier type caliber starter. Like, he's not an ace. Even in his good seasons, he's mid-20s for strikeouts. Right? Last year, he dipped down to 19.8. Year before, 26.1. This year, 23.1. So he's kind of an in-betweener. I don't think he's an ace, but I certainly don't think he's as bad as we saw for most of last year and not as lousy for home run upside. But if we're targeting bats, if we're looking for power bats, if we're looking for star caliber players who could potentially go a little bit under-owned, I think I saw some popularity as I was clicking around on some of like the Jordans, the Kyle Tuckers of the world, probably a little bit on Jose Altuve. But I think you can string together enough in this Blue Jays lineup that I think there's probably some upside in going to them. And I definitely think you could get that game where Barrios goes out, gives up a home run, gives up 3 or 4 runs, and then puts up 6 decent innings, strikes out a few, and it's one of those washes on both sides where you didn't need Barrios, you didn't want to have the Astros, and we get that kind of a game. That's kind of my risk assessment here, but I do think there's a ceiling beyond that for the Astros, especially if they can get into this Blue Jays bullpen. I think there's a ceiling here that's worth chasing, particularly with some of like the Chas McCormicks from later in the lineup. Jose Abreu's been god-awful, but he only cost $2,900, $2,400. I'm sure he will be pretty low-owned here, justifiably. 212, 273, 261 for Abreu, 0.049 ISO, a 50 WRC+. plus. Every reason in the world to avoid Jose Abreu here. But if we're hunting for a low-owned, cheap guy, not that he's a better investment at first base for the same price than Cody Clemens necessarily, but I think he'll be at least low-owned in what should be a possibly productive stack here. So it's a both sideser. I think we do want to roster shares of Jose Barrios at 8,800 on both sites. There's definite upside there, but you can see the model's seeing it more on the Astros side. I think Vegas was agreeing with that, if I'm remembering correctly. Oh no, they've got this is down to a pick 'em. 8 runs, minus 104, 4.04 run total on both sides. So kind of a down to a pick 'em, which is kind of, that's the general assessment that I'm giving here. But for me, by far, Fromber would be my favorite part of this game. I do think Barrios is playable, especially for price, especially where you need 2 pitchers on that DK slate. He's probably your most reliable, cheaper pitcher on DK. If you wanted to make an argument for like, I'm going to roster some shares of Barrios as an SP1, I think you probably get burnt trying to do that and get cute about it with him and like, let's say Reed Detmers. But I do think it's cheap enough that there's some potential there because you can buy so many bats with that salary differential between like rostering like a Fromber and a Barrios or a Fromber and one of the cheaper guys. There's maybe a path to success there, but I think you probably get burnt more often than not by one of the expensive pitchers having a big day. So I don't think that's a great path to success, but I think on a weird tournament slate, on a short slate where we're looking for kind of strange paths that open things up, I think that's maybe viable because that will buy you several hitters downstream. The impact of putting an $8,800 price and we'll spoil the end of the show, an $8,800 price and let's say, one of these Detmers 65. If you're putting that together, or maybe you're grabbing, Barrios and an Aaron Savali at 78, and just not going to the 12 or the 10, that buys you hitters. That buys you value in stacks. So it's a thin path to success, and it probably doesn't work. But short slate, only 4 games. I think there's some viability in doing that on DK. And then I think there's some viability in going to Barrios, but it's an even thinner play if you think about the fact that on the FanDuel slate, on the single pitcher slate, you've also got Zach Wheeler against the Tigers to contend with in terms of guys who may just come out here and blow the doors off regardless of their price. They're just that pure fantasy score that you need, up in like the 50s and the 60s. So thin play for Berrios, but I think it's there. I think there's value in going to it. I probably prefer the Astros bats. So for me, it's probably Fromber, Astros bats, Berrios, Blue Jays bats. I think if I'm ranking it, it's that. If you're going to the Astros, Jeremy Pena up top, having a light season. The triple slash and the production overall is kind of right where it was last year, but it just feels light. 8 home runs, 6 stolen bases feels a little bit off the pace of what he did last year. He's in the leadoff spot today. I think they're hoping to give him a little kick in the ass here. Jose Altuve was my home run pick for the day. So obviously, again, I do like the upside for Astros power here. 2 home runs in 53 plate appearances. We know Altuve's a star. Jordan, another star, 17 home runs, a 308 ISO. Light tower power. I think that 16.63 leads the home run model today overall. So definitely power option there. Bregman, nice to see him back in the lineup after a day off yesterday, hitting cleanup here, 4,700, 3,100. Totally viable in that role for Alex Bregman. Pretty cheap for Alex Bregman too, if we think back on his talent over time. And he's a guy who at least, at the very, very least, is putting the ball in play. He's not hitting it as hard as he used to. He's not hitting as many home runs as he used to, but only an 11.5% strikeout rate. 8 homers on the season, 111 WRC plus. Still a productive guy. Tucker, the power's down a little bit, but I think there's definitely plenty of options here. OMG Father is asking, is Lock at 605 or is it a 5-gamer? On FanDuel, Lock is at 605. It's a 5-gamer. On DK, it's at 707, 4-gamer. There's 5 games that are on that slate in the salary pool, but the White Sox-Yankees game became the second game of a doubleheader, so they scratched it, so you won't score from that game. So don't roster White Sox or Yankees. 5 on FanDuel, Larry. Unless something changed. Did they change that? If they somehow added that weird Yankees game, that's problematic. Make me go double check now. Five games still on FanDuel. Don't do that to me. Detroit, Philly, Mets, Atlanta, Houston, Toronto, Cubbies, and the Angels, and Boston and Cleveland. Yeah, 6:05 start. Yeah, 6 o'clock. Yeah, gotcha, Larry. OMG5 only plays on DK. Yeah, I typically only play on the FanDuel slates, which is why like a lot of my stuff is geared around what FanDuel's doing when I decide what time shows start and stuff like that. But Larry's lazy, didn't want to type the 05. But yeah, it's that's why I try and hit both sites and talk through as much DK strategy that I can. And I think the DK game is super interesting with the 2 pitcher combinations and being able to do stuff like what I was just talking about with potential value pitcher, and forego the pricey pitchers on DK. It just creates interesting possibilities from a game theory perspective and everything. So it's a lot of fun to play over there, but I just don't, for whatever reason. I've just been a FanDuel guy, a little brand loyalty for whatever reason. Same reason I buy Heinz ketchup. I don't know. So let's see. What did we not talk about? If you're going to Blue Jays, it's lower end because of the potentially capped home run upside, but obviously George Springer, Bo Bichette, Vladdy Guerrero, you can play against pretty much anybody. Matt Chapman, another guy just completely frozen during May after that white hot start that he had. But the premium contact is still there. While everything else is dipped, the premium contact still 19.9% barrels, 60.2% hard hits, only 4,900, 3,200 across sites. I think that's value at third base. Brandon Belt in the lineup again at first base, 2,400, 2,600. 4th home run of the year last year after we talked about him. Definite price-based upside for him. Not likely to hit a home run against Fromber here. What you're hoping for is that righty out of the bullpen that he catches at the right time. But he's been productive with the bat in terms of just generating runs, getting on base, a 385 on base percentage, 135 WRC plus in a limited sample out of Belt. That's been terrific. Striking out too much at 37.3%, don't get me wrong, but 15.4% walks at least helps offset that somewhat. Whit Merrifield, Santiago Espinal, Kevin Kiermaier. I think that could be an interesting little group of hitters. I'm not saying roster those 3 guys as your Blue Jays stack, but if you're including Whit Merrifield here in particular, a good hit tool specialist type guy could hit the ball on the ground and beat it out to first base with his speed and then give you a little bit of sneaky value with his 16 stolen base upside, maybe some correlated scoring. I kind of wish he was hitting 9th. And we could use him as a better wraparound up to the Springer, Bichette, Vladdy part of the lineup here. He's viable to do that from 7, and you can connect him into the back end of one of those stacks from 7, preferably with like a Belt or a Chapman attached to it. But it's not the ideal spot. But what my point is, like a hit tool and speed kind of a guy could come through and deliver if the Blue Jays end up scoring, say 6-7 runs instead of like going off completely, he could be one of those guys that delivers you a valuable enough score on a short slate with his skill set that I think he's got some value here. Multi-position second base outfield for 3,600, 3,000. I think Merrifield's in play. Espinal, lower end multi-position guy on DK, 2,200. Has not been productive this year. 197, 256, 263, only a 46 WRC plus, .066 ISO and 1 home run. He came in talking about focusing on hitting for more power. It was kind of like when in Major League 2 when Willie Mays Hayes came back and looked to be a power hitter, and they were yelling at him, hit the ball on the ground, don't be a power, you're not a home run hitter, and then it died on the vine for him. I think that's what happened to Espinal this year. He hit 7 home runs in 491 plate appearances last year, and like I said, came into spring training like, I'm going to be a power hitter now, and I think it just kind of fell apart. Also dealt with injury and absence, only 83 plate appearances, so who knows what the actual reality is, but it certainly hasn't worked out according to his plan there. So maybe he goes back to being a contact-focused hitter and gets a little better. Kiermaier, we've talked about a few times. Cheap, has been productive this year, but over time, not an offensively oriented player. He's here for defense. Let's pick up a little pace here. If you want to find out about Matt Dermody and his background, I did write about it a little bit in the article, but I won't rant about it too much on the show. Some less than fortunate bigoted tweets in his history out there, but he's a $4,000 pitcher on the DK slate, so we do need to talk about him a little bit. Going up against his Guardians lineup, they've been very low end all season long. They are one of the worst teams in baseball in general for run creation, have not hit for very much power, but I think there's enough friskiness in their lineup in terms of what are they doing against wrote about it here. Thought I wrote about it. Yeah, 4.64 implied run total. I thought I had written about their splits, but I guess I didn't. But a 4.64 implied team total for the Guardians in Vegas is a healthy enough spot that I think I'm more interested in some of these Guardians bats than Dermody. A $4,000 pitcher. He's a 32-year-old. He's a non-prospect, pitched in Japan in 2021. Last year, 79 and a third innings as a starter in AAA for the Cubbies, a 4.21 xFIP, a 20.3% strikeout rate. This year, 8 starts for Boston's organization in AAA, a 3.95 xFIP, a 24.4% strikeout rate. Reasonable enough to expect if he gets like 5 innings for the $4,000 price, he could deliver on that. That's a cheap hitter price on DK. So I do think he's part of that pool. But I find it difficult to recommend him given who he is, apparently. I didn't even know his name, didn't know who he was this morning, but didn't like what I found out about him. But I'm more inclined to believe in the idea that the Guardians could come through against a low-end minor league pitcher. There's a reason this guy isn't a known commodity. He's pitched, I think it was 30 total innings in his career in the show, all out of the bullpen. That's for a reason. It's not like this guy's going to come in and suddenly dominate in the majors at age 32. He's just here filling a spot today. So, very, very tepid interest, even at that DraftKings price. If you're going there, I don't think you're making a mistake. You can put that together with one of those super high-end pitchers and kind of offset that difference making, Berrios and Detmer's kind of a combination. If you're putting this kid together with those guys, you're basically at that same price point. I think it's lower end still, but it puts you at that same price point and affords you the ability to buy those hitters. But when you think about, like, everybody who's doing that is taking the worst pitching option there, that still is an argument in favor to me of going to like mid-range rather than super high expensive price and this guy. That's kind of the way I look at it, but I don't think you're making a mistake given that hitter price on this pitcher. But I do want to go to Guardians. They're showing a little bit of upside for power, but they've been awful this season. Naylor leads the team with 8 home runs. Jose Ramirez has been bad this year. 6 home runs, 5 stolen bases on the year, only a 172 ISO. He was sitting at exactly league average 100 WRC plus coming into yesterday. So I guess it's nice to see that he kept his chin above water at 101. But it's just been ugly. But if you're talking about Steven Kwan, Ahmed Rosario, Jose Ramirez, Josh Naylor, Josh Bell, Andres Jimenez, that's a list of 6 hitters that I kind of believed in coming into this season. So if I want to write off 200 and change plate appearances from all of these guys and all of these struggles, if you're looking for a get-right spot, this is against this guy and then whatever comes out of the Red Sox bullpen here, there's got to be upside for the Guardians here at these prices. I expect they won't be crazy popular, even with the clunky matchup here, even with a healthy total in Vegas. They've just been bad enough that they'll probably be not as popular, at least as they should be in this spot. And there's some affordable prices on these guys. Josh Bell, 2,600 on both sites at first base. Guy hit 29 home runs 2 years ago. Then it dropped to 17 last year, and he's only got 4 this year with a 123 ISO in 227 plate appearances. Hits from both sides of the plate. 7.4% barrels, 40.3% hard hits. That's relatively in line with what he did last year when he hit 17 homers. Strikes out at an okay 21.1% clip. Walks at a 13.2. He should be better than he's been. Andres Gimenez, bad this year. 2.3% barrels, 22.1% hard hits. That's down from only 6.2% and 37.6%, which are, average-ish, not outstanding numbers. But that supported at least like 17 home run output for Gimenez last year. So I think there's just guys who are better than what we've seen this season, especially in that top 6, that I'll roster some of these Guardians hitters a little bit aggressively, especially if they're under-owned by the field. I think it's a spot where I want to take advantage. They'll probably be, like I said, probably not as popular as maybe they should be, but they'll probably be more popular than some of the teams facing like Strider, facing Valdez. So they're on the board. They're probably going to be a value-based play as well with some of these low prices. The back end is weird with Miles Straw hitting 7th, followed by Will Brennan and Cam Gallagher. It's just a weird configuration of those hitters. Miles Straw is a slap-hitting speed specialist, speed and defense type guy who does really nothing at the plate. Into Brennan and Gallagher, who aren't like ideal guys to turn the lineup over or correlate with the top end or maybe provide a little speed. I guess Brennan could maybe do that. 261, 298, 380, and 88 WRC plus, 3 homers, 5 steals, but kind of a weak back end there. So top 6 for Cleveland here. Boston, I think, is kind of in play, but what you'll notice is I'm getting an interesting projection on Aaron Savali here. 17.1% strikeout rate, 17 and 2/3 innings in only 3 starts. Made 2 starts against the Mariners to open the year, then got hurt with an oblique injury, and then came back with a 5-inning start that was fairly effective in his last outing last week. That was, who did he throw that against? 4-hit game, walked 2, struck out 4 in that start against the Twins last week. So it's not a high impact play, but I think on the idea that we might get 6 innings, maybe he pitches clean here, maybe he gets it through the Red Sox. I think maybe there's a little bit of low-owned upside here in Aaron Savali. Like, this is like a 6 innings, handful of strikeouts type projection. It's not like we're saying he's going to go out, dominate the world, pitch a complete game shutout in which he strikes out 12 hitters. That's not what we're getting from Aaron Savali. I think we know that. But I think he's good enough in terms of being able to eat some innings for us. Not really a guy who walks too many hitters. Last year, 5.4% walks. This year, in the tiny sample, 5.7. The year before, 6.2. Last year, he struck out more hitters than I remembered. 24.1% over 97 innings, 20 starts. I think the 19.9 from 2 years ago, probably a little bit more who he is in the long term. But if we're getting 1 in 5 strikeouts with upside to 1 in 4, I think there's enough on the vine there at these cheap prices. 8,200 on the FanDuel slate, 7,800 on the DK slate. He's in play against the Red Sox. And for the Red Sox, really, you worry about these guys. Not necessarily Jarren Duran, so you get the version with no Verdugo in the lineup. I hadn't noticed that until just now. Rob Refsnyder hitting 6th. That is not an ideal version of the Red Sox lineup either. So I think that only serves to enhance the Savali play. Taking Verdugo out of that leadoff spot, Jarren Duran's a frisky enough player, but 333 on base, 274 average, 106 WRC plus, and 174 plate appearances, 29.9% strikeout rate. That is most certainly not Alex Verdugo leading off anymore. Duran leads into Yoshida, Turner, Devers. That's the playable core from the Red Sox side of things here, I think, today. Yoshida, outstanding season, 10.1% strikeouts, leading the team at 318, 391, 498, leading the team with a 44% better than average mark for run creation so far this year. Just dynamite player that the Red Sox bought out of Japan. Very good buy for them. I talked about it yesterday. We were kind of questioning the salary they chose to pay him, but he's earning it right now. He's been dynamite this year, covering kind of for Devers in a little bit of a downturn for Devers in terms of the run creation numbers. Still hitting for power, 233 ISO, 13 home runs, very good 12.6% barrel rate, 52.2% hard hits for Devers, which are both up from last year. But the run creation mark has dipped and his price has gone down along with it. So I'm just thanking the sites for the discount on Rafael Devers here at 52.36. I think you roster him all day and just kind of move on. Nod to the DFS gods there and thank him and move on and roster Devers. Tristan Casas, Rob Refsnyder, Christian Arroyo, Reese McGuire, Enrique Hernandez down the bottom of the lineup. It is not a good back end of final half here for the Red Sox. Casas, light tower power, but has really, really struggled for the most part this year. 12.3% barrels is good. 43% hard hits is fine. But 194, 318, 364, 88 WRC plus. That's been ugly. Refsnyder, this is like where he belongs in a lineup. He's been working mostly as a platoon specialist against lefties, but they've been miscasting him in the leadoff spot or in the 3 spot most of the season in that role. He's more of a 6, 7, 8 kind of a hitter, journeyman, utility man type player. Over 107 plate appearances, effective enough with a 131 WRC plus, 287, 421, 379, but on the wrong side of his splits here against Savali. It's not a great spot for Rob Refsnyder. Arroyo, journeyman utility man infielder type. Reese McGuire, their lower end catcher. You can see Reese McGuire, 95 plate appearances, 0 home runs, 0% barrel rate. Compared to what Connor Wong does at the plate, we know who the better Red Sox catcher is for what we want. Enrique Hernandez, good utility player over time, a guy that we've been able to use over time, but it's been flat this season for Hernandez. 229, 302, 348, 77 WRC plus, 5 homers, 2 steals. That is not pretty. Multi-position, 3 positions on FanDuel for only 2,600 is good. When you're only getting him at shortstop for 32 on DK, it's not great, especially hitting 9th. If he was hitting like 6th where Refsnyder is, you'd have more of an argument to make, but not pretty for Hernandez. So I think there's support for the Savali play in the Red Sox flawed lineup here. So for me, this one's probably Guardians bats, Savali, Red Sox top end, and then, if you're playing on DK, you mix in the bigot on the mound if you want to. I'll let that comment sit while I sip some iced tea. Just not good. This day and age, how do you not know that you shouldn't say things like that on Twitter? You can think them all you want. You have the right to think them. You have the right for that to be your opinion. But everybody in the world has the right to judge you if you state that opinion publicly, and I think the world is judging him, and I certainly am. Anyway, obviously you can have your own opinion. Don't have Twitter. Yeah, exactly. It's like OMG Father says. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. The mistake that the kid made was stating it publicly in the modern climate in the world, regardless of what anybody out there thinks. And hopefully nobody, my personal opinion is hopefully nobody shares this kid's opinion who's hanging out here with us today. But if you do, just, let's not talk about it for DFS. Let's just focus on what we're here to talk about. And I should probably have not brought it up as much as I did. But anyway, let's move on. New York Mets, Atlanta Braves. Spencer Strider on the mound, 12,000, 11-4. Monster projection for Strider, monster performance from Strider. I think it's a no-brainer. You can fire away with as many shares of Spencer Strider as you want. Whatever your heart desires with Spencer Strider is not a mistake here. 40.6% strikeout rate, a 19.8% swinging strike rate, a 35.4% CSW percentage. Dominant. Every one of those marks leads the league by far. He is the best pitcher in baseball right now. Full stop. Justin Verlander on the other side, 8,600, 9,400. Discounted prices for Verlander. I know he's not been Justin Verlander level this year. 20.5% strikeout rate, certainly concerning. A dip in swinging strikes, a dip in CSW percentage. It is somewhat concerning for Justin Verlander when you look only at those surface numbers. The 4.39 xFIP isn't great. The 4.25 ERA, very non-Verlanderian. 8.4% barrels, 90.3 mile an hour average exit velo, a 4.11% home run rate. None of that is good. It's all been problematic. But then we look a little bit deeper. If you look through his game log, it actually hasn't been all that bad. The most recent start, 8 strikeouts, 6 innings against the Blue Jays, 5 hits, just a solo home run that he allowed. He was terrible in the game before that. That was at Coors Field, though. So he gave up 6 runs on 9 hits, 2 strikeouts. That was a Coors Field game. So that impacts the statistical line that's on the surface here that we're looking at. Game before that, allowed a solo home run, but only 2 other hits. Struck out 5 over 8 innings against the Guardians, who we know are difficult to strike out outside of all their other lack of ability. The 8 innings are great to see. 5 strikeouts against that lineup it's okay. It's not the dominant performance we want, but it's okay. He had a bad start against the Rays. His first start of the year was bad, but then he had one other start in Cincinnati, struck out 7 Reds, allowed just 1 run on 2 hits over 7. So he's pitched deep into some of these games. He's come out earlier when he's run into trouble. He's had a little bit of trouble with the long ball. The strikeout totals haven't necessarily been what we wanted, but a couple of them are, I don't want to hand wave them away, but I think you can explain a couple of those spots away. The issue here is that he's going up against the Braves, which sucks. it's not a good get right spot. Kind of like the same thing we talked about with Max. I think it's the same exact play. You're coming back with Justin Verlander here at good prices. I think you can throw Verlander into this Braves lineup a few times, and more aggressively if he's not that popular. Olsen strikes out a ton. Riley strikes out a ton. Eddie Rosario strikes out a ton. Ozuna strikes out at a fair clip. Albies is a very good hitter at avoiding strikeouts. Darno is okay at avoiding strikeouts. Acuna is great at avoiding strikeouts and has all his talent. So outside of those three guys, there are punch-outs available for Verlander here, despite what the 21.6% overall total suggests, because some of the lower strikeout rates come from some of their lesser guys. No Sean Murphy in the lineup. You do get Darno, who is no slouch at catcher. Hit, 18 home runs and 426 plate appearances last year. So Darno's got a little bit of pop, but he's not Sean Murphy. So that's a little bit of a downgrade to the middle of the lineup here. Everything else is as it normally is for the Braves. I think for every share of Verlander you go to, you should probably grab a share of Braves bats, if not two. I think the upside probably still lays with the Braves here. And you can see that in the run total. Going up against Verlander, you would normally expect kind of a capped run total, at least historically. Braves, one of the highest run totals on the slate at 4.93. So Vegas is kind of seeing it that way too. I think they're thinking, hey, he's struggling with the home runs. Even if he has an okay game, pitches deep, probably isn't going to find his normal strikeout totals or a huge strikeout total, and probably will give up a dinger or two. So that's what you're looking for here. But it could also settle in as another one of those spots where he doesn't deliver. Braves lineup doesn't really deliver for our DFS purposes. So I will play Verlander. I certainly will play Braves against him. Tempered expectations on both sides. With the value salary at Verlander, though, I think he's my preferred option between that. And I'm just hoping he comes in a little bit underowned, a little bit unpopular because of the matchup here and because of maybe perceptions of what his performance is. OMG Father, yeah, 12K, not expensive enough for Strider. Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, it's Larry C mentions, I said it at the top of the show, but it's good callback there for sure. No Pete Alonso is a massive downgrade to this Mets lineup, and we'll talk about that right now. Mets on the other side of this one. So you're rostering, if you go to Braves, by the way, it's obvious, right? Acuna, Olsen, Riley off the top, and then mix and match any of these guys to your heart's content if you go to this. Eddie Rosario having a good season. Marcelo Ozuna having a very good season for power, 11 home runs at 241 ISO. Doesn't do a ton else, but he's creating runs 10% better than average and just massive power, 14.9% barrel rate. It was really funny. I don't know if you guys saw him blast one of the longest singles you'll ever see off the center field facade the other day. Hit like the top of the wall out in dead center field. He stood at home plate for a solid 5 seconds watching it. And then you saw the oh shit moment when it bounced off the top of the wall and only got a single out of it. Wasn't pretty, but 11 home runs, monster power from him. Ozzy Albies, I love at second base. Never as popular as he should be, never as expensive as he should be because he hits down lineup a little bit. But 13 home runs from a second baseman is tremendous value. 223 ISO, gets himself involved. So I really like Albies. We've talked about Orlando Arcia, Michael Harris with all his struggles. He's very cheap. So 1 through 9, you're rostering Braves. But we were going to talk about the Mets when I started that rant. No Pete Alonso, definite upside, addition to the upside for Spencer Strider stacks here. You do still have Lindor. They ended up on the version of the lineup that I suggested that they maybe should look at with moving somebody up and hitting Lindor in the cleanup spot instead of Starling Marte like was originally projected this afternoon. Marte would have been miscast in the cleanup role. So I'm glad they landed Lindor there. A little bit of a bump to Francisco Alvarez hitting second today. But it's just deadly bad against Spencer Strider. And if you think in terms of a kid who's been a productive rookie hitter that when we didn't really expect him to be, we kind of thought maybe he was here a little bit early coming into this season with his injury-based promotion. And he delivered 9 home runs at 270 ISO. But if you think in terms of like who's this kid not going to be, who's he going to be overmatched against? Spencer Strider is probably the top name on that list. So even with the bump to the second spot, I don't know if I love the opportunity for Francisco Alvarez here, but that does help replace Pete Alonso. It's not going to come anywhere near actually replacing him, but it's a better configuration than what I originally saw for the Mets today. Very, very tepid interest in Mets. I think you can go there on a very short slate, 4 games to choose from. There's enough upside in the idea that Spencer Strider is not invulnerable on the mound. 10.3% barrels and 39% hard hits, 19.3% degree launch angle. Maybe you get a little pop from a Lindor. Maybe you get like Nimmo and McNeil reach base and Lindor hits you a 3-run home run. That's about all you're going to get, though. You're probably going to have a bunch of strikeouts still on Strider's side. So I think Strider can deliver, even if he gives up a couple earned runs here, can still probably deliver the highest score of the day for his salary. That would thin it out. You'd rather have him pitch clean innings, but it's not great for the Mets. Mark Vientos hitting 9th, 2,800, 2,200. Should at least call him out. He's gotten limited plate appearances, only 34 opportunities since his call-up. They should either play him every day or send him back to AAA. They're not doing anybody justice by keeping him on the bench in the show. But he's here in the lineup today. He's cheap. Kid's got big-time power upside. Has shown it throughout the minors. Maybe go there. You get configuration of the lineup with a second catcher in it with Omar Narvaez, Tommy Pham, Starling Marte. It's not great on the back end, and they're facing Spencer Strider. So only really limited interest in the Mets. If I'm going there, it's probably going to be something like Nimmo. I would probably include McNeil just based on the idea of we want somebody who can reach first base for us, and then we're hoping for that Lindor or maybe Brett Beatty home run. So it's probably the guys who can get on base, Nimmo and McNeil up top, maybe Lindor, maybe Brett Beatty, and then if you're on DK, I guess you go Alvarez over Narvaez. You could take the discount and go to Narvaez, but he's a little bit offset from where the prime part of the stack would be. On FanDuel, since you're only four-manning it, I would probably just go Nimmo, McNeil, Lindor, and Beatty, and move on. If you wanted to replace Beatty with Marte, that's fine. With Pham, that's fine. Not great for the Metsies here, though. So, four corners. I think, significantly more enthusiasm. Strider way up top. More enthusiasm for the Braves stack, but Justin Verlander at price, I think for the DFS purposes of it all, I would slide him into that second spot if I'm ranking this, put the Braves third, and then way further down the list, the Mets stack here. 15K for Strider. Yeah, that's lofty, but not completely unrealistic. He went on a run earlier in this season. He was chasing, I assume it's Nolan Ryan's record for consecutive games with, I think it was 9 strikeouts. He came close, but I don't think he got there early this season. Dennis is saying this is only a 4-game slate. I would guess it was at least 9 games. How long we're going here? Yeah, come on. If you didn't think I was going to stretch a show with only 4 games into an hour-long show, I wrote like 6,000 words or 7,000 words about it. Yeah, we're going way in depth, but that's what I love about this, right? That's why I enjoy doing this stuff. That's why we're doing it in the first place. But we are at the last game here. I don't know if we have confirmed lineups yet. Doesn't look like. Last game on deck. We've got viable pitching on both sides in this one. Drew Smyly, it's not pretty, but you're getting a guy who, for his career, is basically a league average pitcher. It's not like Smiley's bad. 21.3% strikeout rate this year, 3.56 ERA, 4.49 xFIP, a 6.3% walk rate. Doesn't give up a ton of power, only 86.3 miles an hour on the average exit velo. Nice little limited 30% hard hit rate, 5.7% barrels. All of this is basically consistent with what he's done over time. If we look back, 4.48 ERA, 4.39 xFIP 2 years ago, 21.4% strikeouts. Last year, 20.4% strikeouts, 3.47 ERA, 4.18 xFIP. It's hard to not do this while also sounding a little bit monotonous just reading these numbers off. But I think it's important to illustrate his just general consistency of being about a league average pitcher. When he checks in against a fairly free swinging Angels lineup, I think there's enough value there for 1 in 5 strikeouts, upside to 1 in 4, 7,000, 7,500 across sites. I like it better as a cheap SP2 on DK. For 7,000, there's enough value there for Smyly. It's not great. It probably won't succeed, but I think you can get away with it for sure at the price on DK. And I think he can give you 6 clean innings and a handful of strikeouts for 75 on FanDuel. You will probably get eclipsed by one of those super expensive pitchers, but those guys cost what, a third again on top of his price, or if not half again on top of his price. So there's enough value there if you buy the right hitters with that price difference that he could get you there. Could be one of those weird days where you see a bunch of lineups up top with either Fromber or Wheeler or Strider in them, but also a mix of lineups up top with a cheap pitcher in it because they bought the right bats. So that's what it'll come down to when you go to those discount pitchers. You need to succeed on both ends. He needs to give you a good enough game to stay competitive enough that the difference you make up with those hitters slightly outpaces whatever the Spencer Striders of the world do. It's not great. He's going up against a jam-packed with power Angels lineup here, some star power in it. But I do think there's an uptick for strikeout rate in replacing Hunter Renfroe with Joe Adell. Joe Adell is like a 30+%, pushing 40% strikeout rate guy. He's been absolutely mashing in AAA this year, though. Adell so far in AAA, Where is it? It was like, I think it was 18 home runs. It's in the article somewhere. 18 home runs for Adele in 18 home runs, a 316 ISO in 242 plate appearances in AAA. Only cost 2,500 on both sites. So I think it's a firm both side spot. If you're going to Smiley, you want to take out shares of the Angels. Trout and Ohtani are super obvious up top. Taylor Ward, less obvious because he's kind of struggled this season. Only 241, 307, 366, 87 in the WRC+. Plus, if he leads off, he's a much better option up there than maybe it seems like because of how he correlates for cheap prices with the stars. You might also get Mickey Moniak up there despite the lefty on the mound. You might get a configuration that sees somebody else leading off and Taylor Ward hitting later in the lineup. We'll see what they do. Trout and Ohtani, like I said, super obvious. Brandon Drury, 10 home runs on the season at 234 ISO. Excellent power output from Drury. First base and second base eligible on both sites. Only 4,100, 3,000. That's a nice little bargain in the middle of this lineup. Anthony Rendon can give you value too. I talked about him in his return yesterday. 284, 401, 349. That's a great triple slash. Over 137 plate appearances earlier in the season from Rendon. A 118 WRC plus. His power hasn't been there, but a 43.3% hard hit rate does suggest a little bit more power to come. Consistent plate appearances. I think he's a guy who delivers regularly when it comes to being on base, provided correlated scoring, provided doubles that drive in runs. So a playable DFS part for very cheap prices. And we've seen the ceiling from Rendon be significantly higher. He also only strikes out 11.7% of the time so far this year. Last year that was 18.1%, so it'll probably settle in a little bit higher. But he strikes out at a limited pace, puts the ball in play, walks at a great clip. So I really like Rendon at price. Adele, like I said, star caliber power, but maybe he ends up being one of those quad A types who never quite figures it out at the major league level. That's what he was kind of looking like so far, but he's still only 24. So we're getting him still at the early stages of that development. It's not like he's 27, 28, like the Rookers, like the Burgers of the world, 28, 29, whatever those guys are. At 24, there's still room for growth for Joe Adele. So I think we roster him here for a home run upside against the lefty. 2,500 will probably be pretty popular just because of the name recognition and the price. And then you get Gio Urshela, Chad Wallach, Zach Neto in the back of the projected lineup. Neto, hit tool specialist, called up as a rookie too early probably, and only delivering a 239, 318, 361 triple slash, but a decent enough stick for the price at shortstop that if you want to use him as a wraparound play, it's probably viable against Smiley here, who will allow some contact. On the other side of this one, Detmers, I think, is getting a little bit of recognition and draw and popularity across sites because he's been pitching effectively. 26.4% strikeout rate, a 5.15 ERA, a 4.05 xFIP is certainly a lot better than the ERA, but has given up some runs, has given up a 91.1 mile an hour average exit velo, 43.4% hard hits, but he's missed barrels. 4.9% barrels has kept them to only 2.2% home runs this year. It'll be interesting to see how all this sorts out in the wash for Detmers because the 16.6 degree average launch angle suggests some home run trajectory. The hard hits, the exit velo certainly suggests some of that trajectory. So there might be a little bit of luck in missing those barrels and only resulting in the 2.2% home runs. We could see the run creation mark go up. We could see some problems around the 154 whip and the 9.3% walk rate. But the strikeouts have been good. The overall has been good for Detmers, over 50 and 2/3 in 10 starts. So at price, 6,500, 7,100, I definitely think you can get away with shares of Reed Detmers here. The Cubs were the team I was thinking of before that I wrote about the splits, though. I do want to touch on that because the Cubs have been pretty good against lefties this year. They are eighth in the bigs, eighth in the league. I don't know why I stumbled over saying that. 117 collective WRC plus against lefties. They also are the worst team for strikeouts against lefties, though, at 27%. So maybe they create some runs. I do think that justifies going to both sides here. They're super cheap up and down the lineup on both sites. You get 5,000 and 5,200 for Horner and Dansby Swanson up at the top before everybody drops into the low fours down to the low twos on the DK slate. And then on FanDuel, $3,500 Nico Horner is the most expensive player on the slate. You get Dansby at 31 and then everybody else is in the 2,000s. I think they're easy to go to here. There's plenty of right-handed pop, so you can deliver maybe, if I'm right about Detmers, maybe getting a little bit lucky in terms of what he's done with the home runs. Maybe get the Patrick Wisdom home run upside, the Chris Morel home run upside, Ian Happ from both sides of the plate, Dansby Swanson from the right side, Seiya Suzuki, Young Gomes from the right side. There's home run upside here.
They haven't delivered a ton of them this year. They've been getting their runs more through their excellent on-base skills, their correlated scoring skills. They hit home runs when they've needed to. Wisdom's got 14. Morel had that 3 days in which he hit 9 home runs or whatever it was. But he's cooled badly, probably hitting down lineup a little bit. So we'll see what we get from the confirmed version of the lineup here. But I think you go to Detmers for sure, especially at the DK price. There's value there all day long. Could put up a very healthy strikeout total against the Cubbies and all their free swingers here who strike out aggressively against left-handed pitching. But the Cubbies might string together some runs. The WRC mark is great. You need them to sequence and provide correlated scoring, and then you're hoping that one of the righties hits a home run here for you. So I think that's what we're looking at on both sides. Talked about the Angels lineup, talked about the Cubbies. That's about it. Let's scroll over. We'll take a quick look at the pitching board. And then we'll punch out because it's 5 o'clock. Slate starts in an hour on FanDuel. Got to build some lineups. Okay, let's see here. All right, so we talked about pitching. Dermody not available on the FanDuel slate, costs you $4,000 on the DK slate. I don't have a projection on him because he's not on that FanDuel slate, so he doesn't come through my model. I expect 4 or 5 innings of mediocre pitching. If you get that for $4,000, you might get a handful of strikeouts. Maybe he gives you enough there where you're putting him together for $12,000 for Strider at $12,000 and you're offsetting price to just $16,000 at pitcher. That is competitive with if you combine, let's say, Savali and Verlander here, that's $16,400. So going to Strider and this asshole is less expensive than going to 2 value pitchers. That's what you gain from going to Dermody. But it's not great. I don't expect a lot. Like I said before, there's a reason this guy's 32 and you don't know his name. Strider, dominant. You can go to him as many times as you want. If you went to him 150 times, there's other options. You probably shouldn't do that. Is it a mistake? Might not be. He's very likely to deliver the highest score at pitcher. On the FanDuel slate, you get a lot of upside out of Zach Wheeler, though. So like these 3 guys, you can see it in the projections. They're all right next to each other. So I will spread a pretty big percentage of my overall shares. Like if I build 100 lineups that just focus on those 3 guys on FanDuel and then use the other 50 to spread some Savali, Verlander, Detmers, Smiley shares, maybe some Barrios, I think that might be a viable approach. These guys command so much of the attention on that FanDuel slate. I do want to work in some value Savali based on what my model at least is seeing for him. We're looking for those clean innings. We're looking for a handful of strikeouts against a weakened version of the Red Sox lineup. Fanatic says, like Detmers here, Cubs have been struggling. Yeah, it's like we said, the Cubbies, good for run creation against lefties on the whole this season, but not great in terms of just winning ball games. They've been not a great baseball team overall, and you need them to sequence because they're not hitting for a ton of power. They have some, but not a ton. So with that combination of factors, the fact that they're not scoring tons and tons of runs, hitting tons and tons of home runs, and the fact that they're striking out at the league worst clip, I think it was 27% against lefties, that suggests a significant amount of upside for a Detmer, the version of Detmers that's striking out 26% of opposing hitters this year. So you really like the spot for Detmers. I totally agree, and I think there's value that maybe is not translating fully in my model here. There's some history in there with Detmers that's not fully caught up to this year's strikeout output. So maybe he projects a little higher in this Verlander Savali range. In truth. But I think regardless of where the projection lands, it's already offset by the salary, right? So we know that we're just going there. But I do think Smiley, by the same token, is also viable at price. If we're going to the 65, 7,000 range on pitchers, I think he's right on that list too. Lower doses, worse matchup going up against the Angels, but there's enough there that, you fail 90% of the time, but that 10% that you win, you only need to win around that 10% to have it pay off if you just go back to these right plays over time, right? It's just a matter of making the right play again and again. Kind of like in poker, where just because your pre-flop aces lost to some idiot that stayed in with a deuce 7 offsuit pre-flop when you got all your chips in good, just because that lost doesn't mean you made the wrong play. And you only need that to work out the percentage of time that equates to, offsetting the odds properly. And that's with every hand. That's with, if you play a straight flush draw the same way every time in a certain situation, you only need it to actually work out for you a certain amount of times. So the times that you don't get there, as long as there was enough money in the pot when you did it, it makes sense. You only need to get there one time in X to have that payoff and be the right play. It's the same concept with these value pitchers. You only need Reed Detmers to deliver one time in X for that to be the right play, and you make money the time that it was X. You fail the other times, but you didn't fail. Reed Detmers did. You made the right play. That's why I don't get too concerned when, you've got guys in your lineup that, I was wrong about that pitcher today. He went bust. it was still the right play. What we talked about was still totally valid. It's just that guy happened to go out and not deliver that night. So it's just about making the right plays time and time again and just whittling down the odds against to the point where you're getting odds in favor, or you're at least facing the challenge with the best possible odds in your favor. And then when it hits, it pays off in spades, and that's how you make money. Lecture concluded. So I think really, most of these guys are in play. You've got Holton on the weekend. You've got Dermody down up there with no projection. But Strider, Wheeler, Valdez, Savali, Verlander, Detmer, Smiley, Barrios, all those guys are in play for at least a few shares. If you're building 150 lineups, I think you build a pretty broad pitching pool here. Terry closing with a TED Talk. Exactly, Larry. Well, I keep saying in the Discord, I'll go back and answer some of these questions, and then at the end of the days, like my fingers and like the tendons in my forearms on those like 12-game days get tired from all that typing, and then doing the show as well and having to build lineups. I just run out of momentum sometimes. So sometimes it's just easier to talk it through a little bit. But yeah, that's happens to aces all the time. Fanatic says Wheeler had -3 FanDuel points last start. Yeah, that's definitely a problem when that happens. But that's his failure, not ours. We make the right plays, and that's what we have to focus on. Arcathelza, what's my favorite stack today? All of them. It's difficult. I really like the opportunity on the FanDuel slate for that Phillies team going up against the Tigers bullpen game there. I think that's pretty viable. There's a ton of upside for the Phils. They're not on the DK slate. Don't really like the Tigers. We'll do this in fast forward mode. I like the power upside for the Astros going up against Jose Barrios, but he's been pitching well. That can certainly go sideways. The Blue Jays definitely a lower end stack than they normally would be, so it wouldn't be them. I think the Red Sox, lower end version of their lineup, going up against Savali, who I think keep them in check to like just 3-4 runs. Don't really love that. Kind of like the Guardians going up against the bullpen game from the Red Sox, or the low end starter here from the Red Sox. So I think I like the Guardians a little bit better than I normally would, but they've been bad this season. So we're getting to an ugly stack there. Mets going up against Strider, kind of weak. I think probably if I had to just like in a vacuum, who's the best opportunity for some run creation, some power, oddly, it's probably the Braves going up against this version of Justin Verlander right now, just given their 1-9 talent. But I do believe in the turn for Justin Verlander, so it makes it difficult to recommend the Braves. And then I talked about both pitchers in this one being viable. So my answer really is try and get to a lot. Try and get to a broad share of pitchers. Try and get to a broad share of hitters. And don't discount the value plays that you can find and the upside that you can find on a very, very short slate from the guys at the bottom of a lineup. This is a kind of a slate where you can get a solo homer for 18 and change FanDuel points or whatever from a Chad Wallach that can be slate winning just because there's a lack of options, just because there's a lack. If 10 other guys or if the 7 other guys at his position don't deliver, just a handful of FanDuel points could win you the day or DK points could win you the day at catcher with some oddball play like that. So it's a day to spread your wings for sure. You spread out and get to a lot of these plays. With that in mind, 5:08, I got to get out of here so I can build lineups. I appreciate everybody hanging out. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, all those fun things. Come on back tomorrow. I think me and Gunn are going to do another co-show tomorrow, probably over on his channel. We'll get the details out to everybody. So thank you guys. Everybody saying thanks in the chat. Now, thank you guys. I appreciate you hanging out. If you weren't here, this would just be me talking to myself, which also does happen in this apartment. Less so about baseball, more like I'm talking to the pets or whatever. But I walked out of my apartment yesterday, and the dude who lurks in my hallway far too often was lurking in my hallway. And we shared a look where it was just like, I know you heard me talking to my pets just now, and you know you heard me talking to my pets right now, just now, but we're not going to talk about that. And I walked past him out the door. Anywho, that's it. We're out of here. Good luck tonight, gang. See ya.